I've always been a skeptic when it comes to legends, especially the ones that sound like they're meant to keep kids from wandering too far into the woods. But after what happened to me and my friends last summer in upstate New York, I don't question things like that anymore. It started as a simple road trip. Me, my buddy Jake, his girlfriend Marissa, and my dog, Boone. We all needed a break from the city, and I had been itching to take my old Chevy on a long drive. We planned to camp out for a night near the Catskills, just a short detour before heading up to a cabin Jake's uncle owned. Nothing fancy, just a night under the stars. The weather turned on us halfway through the drive. The sky went from blue to a thick, rolling gray, and by the time we reached the dirt road leading to the campsite, the first drops of rain were hitting the windshield. I remember Marissa checking the forecast and saying, "It's just scattering clouds, nothing crazy." That was the last time any of us felt remotely at ease. The site was deep in the woods, and we were the only ones there. The rain made everything quiet. No birds, no wind through the trees. Just the sound of water dripping on leaves. I got that weird creeping feeling at the back of my neck, like someone was watching us. I chalked it up to nerves. Boone, though, he was acting strange. He's usually the kind of dog who loves the woods, but that night he stuck close to me, ears flat against his head, tail down. He kept staring into the trees, growling low in his throat. Jake joked that maybe Boone had sniffed off a boar, but I could tell he didn't believe that. By the time we had the tent set up and the fire going, the rain had settled into a steady drizzle. We sat around, drinking beers, talking about everything and nothing, when Marissa suddenly stopped mid-sentence. "Did you hear that?" We all listened. At first, nothing, just the rain. Then, from somewhere out in the trees, a soft, deliberate clicking sound, like someone tapping two stones together. Jake stood up and grabbed a flashlight, aiming it toward the noise. "Nothing, probably just water dripping," he said, but he kept the flashlight in his lap after that. I had a bad feeling that wouldn't go away. Something was out there, watching. Boone suddenly let out a deep, guttural bark and lunged toward the trees. I grabbed his collar just in time. That was when I saw it. A figure, half hidden behind a tree, just at the edge of our firelight. It wasn't an animal, and it wasn't a person. Its eyes caught the light too big, too reflective. Its body was impossibly thin, limbs too long. It crouched behind the tree, unmoving, just staring. A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, lighting up the whole area for a split second, and in that moment I saw its face. It looked human, almost, but the mouth was wrong, too wide, stretched into a grin that didn't belong on a living thing. And then it was gone. Jake swore. Marissa grabbed my arm. Boone was barking like mad, but when I turned the flashlight toward where it had been, there was nothing there. No movement, no sound. I wanted to leave right then, but the storm had picked up. The dirt road we came in on would be a mess, and trying to navigate it in the dark would be asking for a disaster. So we did the only thing we could do. We stayed. The night stretched on. Every now and then we heard the clicking sound again, always coming from a different direction. Sometimes it was closer, sometimes farther away, but we never saw anything else. We barely slept. Every little noise had us on edge, clutching the hunting knife I kept in my pack. I don't think any of us let go of our weapons all night. Then, just before dawn, the screaming started. Not human, not an animal. Something between the two. It was close. Jake and I grabbed whatever we could. Knives, the hatchet we brought for firewood. Marissa had her flashlight, hands shaking so hard the beam wobbled over the trees. And then, nothing. Silence. I don't know what made me do it, but I turned the flashlight toward the trees one last time. That's when I saw the footprints. Not the boot prints, not animal tracks. Bare feet, long and narrow, with clawed toes. They circled our camp. That was enough for us. As soon as the sky lightened, we packed up and left in a hurry. We didn't talk, we didn't look back. We just got to the car and drove. Boone didn't stop shaking until we were miles away. I don't know what we saw that night, but I know the stories. Skinwalkers. I always thought they were just legends, something to scare kids. But if you ever find yourself alone in the woods and you hear something clicking in the dark, run, because I swear to you, we weren't supposed to leave that forest alive. Do you ever hear stories about things in the woods? Not just the usual, bears, cougars, maybe some meatheads setting up shop in a hunting blind. I mean the kind of stories that don't make sense, the ones passed down in whispers. I always figured they were just that, stories. But now I know better. It happened last summer, out in the deep woods of Oklahoma. I'd driven down from Lawrence to meet up with my buddy Dan for a hunting trip. We both needed the break, him from his office job, me from hauling freight across the country in my rig. I brought my dog with me, a tough old mutt named Diesel. He'd been with me for years, riding shotgun in my truck, keeping me company on long hauls. The weather had been fine when I left Kansas, but by the time I crossed into Oklahoma, the sky had turned that sickly yellow-green, the kind that tells you a storm's coming. Dan wasn't worried, said we'd be fine as long as we got to the tree line before it hit. So, like idiots, we pressed on. We set up camp near a clearing, right where the trees thinned out before sloping down into a ravine. The air was thick, charged, like it gets before lightning. Diesel was restless, sniffing around, letting out these low, uneasy whines. Then, as we were checking our rifles, we heard it. Something moving fast through the brush, snapping branches, breathing heavy. Not a deer, not a bear. This was something big. I barely had time to turn before it came crashing through the trees. It was tall, wrong, like a man stretched too thin, its limbs too long, skin pulled tight over corded muscle. Its eyes glowed in the dim light, not reflecting, but burning from within. And its mouth, God, its mouth was too wide, full of jagged teeth that didn't fit right. Dan fired first, the shot cracking through the storm-heavy air. The thing flinched, but didn't stop. It was on him in a second, knocking him back with a swipe that sent his rifle skidding into the dirt. Diesel went for its leg, snarling, but the thing kicked him hard, sent him yelping into the bushes. I raised my shotgun and fired. The thing staggered, not like a man getting shot, more like something trying to remember how pain worked. Then, just as fast as it came, it turned and bolted into the trees, moving on all fours, limbs bending in a way that shouldn't be possible. We didn't wait around. Dan grabbed his rifle and we took off back toward the truck, crashing through the underbrush. The storm finally broke overhead, rain coming down in sheets, making the ground slick. Diesel came limping after us, soaked and bloody, but alive. That was all that mattered. But it wasn't over. As we neared the truck, I saw a movement from the corner of my eye. That thing was keeping pace with us, just beyond the trees, moving fast, barely making a sound. Then it lunged. Dan turned and fired again, the muzzle flash lighting up the thing's face, those dead burning eyes locked onto us. My own shot followed, the blast knocking it sideways. It hit the ground, let out this awful, wet screech, but it still wasn't dead. It clawed at the dirt, trying to get up. I didn't think. I ran forward and swung the butt of my shotgun into its head with everything I had. Its skull cracked, and for the first time it made a sound like it actually felt pain. Then it went still. Dan pulled me back, yelling that we had to go. I didn't argue. We scrambled into the truck, Diesel jumping in after us, and I floored it. In the rearview mirror, I saw it twitch. Not dead, just waiting. We didn't stop until we hit the main road, flagged down some guy in a beat-up Ford who must have thought we were insane. Didn't matter, we were alive. Later, when we caught our breath, Tom told me something that made my stomach drop. You ever hear of a Rougarou? I had, sort of. The name had come up before, buried in old stories, in those weird lore-heavy games I used to play, Warhammer, D&D, stuff like that, but I never took it seriously, just campfire bullshit. Except I saw it. We both did. And now, every time I pass through Oklahoma on a long haul, I don't stop, not after dark, not near the woods, because I know it's still out there, and next time it won't let us leave. Have you ever seen something so wrong, so impossible, that your brain just refuses to accept it, like your mind tries to twist reality around it, make sense of it, turn it into something familiar because the truth is too much to handle? I never believed in monsters, not the real kind anyway. I grew up in Denver, raised on hard work and common sense. My old man was a lumberjack and I followed in his footsteps. The closest thing to a boogeyman in my life was the occasional bear getting too close to a work site. Then, last summer, it happened. Me and a few buddies, Ethan, Mark and Sam, rented this old cabin in Michigan. Mark's uncle owned it, way out in the woods, past the last town anyone cared to name. We wanted a quiet place to drink, tell stories, maybe do a little hunting if we get the chance. I brought my dog Buck. He was a tough old mutt, part German Shepherd, part something bigger. A good dog, loyal. The place was nice enough, small, rustic, had that weird old cabin smell like wood and damp earth, but something about it felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. Maybe it was how quiet the woods were, no birds, no wind, just the occasional creak of a tree settling. Even Buck seemed uneasy, sniffing around, growling at nothing. We unpacked, cracked open some beers, settled in. The sun hung low, turning the sky orange, and I finally started to relax. Then Buck started barking, not his usual bark either. This was low, defensive, like he was warning something. We all turned, following his gaze, to the tree line, and that's when we saw it. A figure, tall as hell, standing half hidden behind the tree. At first I thought it was a man, maybe some hunter who wandered too close to the cabin, but the longer I stared, the less sense it made. It wasn't moving, just standing there, watching. Ethan grabbed the flashlight and pointed it toward the figure. That's when it stepped back, deeper into the trees. Not fast, not like something scared of us, more like it wanted us to know it was there. We laughed it off after a while. Mark said it was probably some hermit, some backwoods weirdo living off the grid. Don't mess with him, he won't mess with us. Fine by me. But Buck wouldn't let it go. He kept pacing, kept growling. Eyes locked on the trees long after the figure disappeared. That night, none of us slept well. The next day was normal. We shot cans, played cards, drank too much. By the time the sun dipped behind the hills, I'd almost forgotten about the night before. Almost. Then Buck started barking again. This time, he bolted straight for the trees. I ran after him, my heart hammering. The others followed, flashlights bouncing through the dark. We found him near the tree line, snarling, his fur bristling. And then we saw the tracks. Huge. Not bear tracks, not human either. Something in between. And they led straight back to the cabin. We rushed back, half drunk, half scared, and that's when we heard it. Something heavy walking on the roof. A deep guttural growl. Then the whole damn cabin shook. Mark grabbed his rifle. Sam yanked a hunting knife from his belt. I reached for the axe we brought for chopping firewood. Something slammed against the door. Hard. It wasn't trying to get in. Not yet. It was testing us. Buck was going nuts, barking, snapping at the air. The thing let out a deep, rattling breath, so close I could hear the wetness in its throat. Then, silence. We stayed locked in that cabin all night, weapons in hand, barely breathing. Every so often we'd hear movement outside, heavy steps, a low throaty growl, but it never came inside. Morning came, and for a while I thought maybe it was over. I was wrong. Ethan was the first to step outside, just a few feet, looking around. Then we heard it, a crunch. We turned and saw what was left of a deer, torn open, guts steaming in the morning sun. And beside it, in the dirt, a message. Not written, not carved, formed with bones. It was a warning. We packed up fast, real fast, threw everything into the truck, ready to get the hell out. And that's when we heard the scream, not an animal, not human, something in between. And it was close. We jumped in, slammed the doors and floored it. As we sped down the dirt road, I made the mistake of looking in the rearview mirror, and I saw it, standing at the edge of the trees. Tall, massive, covered in dark matted hair. Its face was almost human, but the eyes, those deep black empty eyes, weren't. It didn't chase us, didn't need to. It had made its point. We didn't stop until we hit the highway. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Mark let out a breath and said, "What the hell was that?" No one had an answer. We haven't been back since. Won't ever go back. And now when people tell Bigfoot stories, I don't laugh, because I know the truth. It's out there, and it doesn't want to be found.